theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Rong reviews it all on Joy Drive.
Good afternoon, Suzy Rong.
Hey Warren, we really cannot afford to be apolitical, can we?
Why is that?
Because the wrong people can very easily sneak into government.
Oh, yes, we haven't spoken because you've been on holidays and, yes, I know, big changes coming our way.
Yeah, we don't know how it's going to impact on us next 4 years. But also in relation with the movie this week, we really need to pay attention to our rights, don't we?
Suzy, I have to admit, we're talking about All Will Be Well, which is screening as part of the Melbourne Queer Film Festival. Suzy, as I was watching it, I was thinking about that as well, and I thought, you know, this is set in Hong Kong, and we'll hear your review very, very shortly, but it wouldn't take much to set things back just a little bit, and it can have huge ramifications for those, if we're in a relationship in particular. And I was thinking about that. It got me contemplating too, Suzy.
Yeah, it's so easy. Like, I think it's a very fragile thing, and it's so easy for us to get our eyes off the ball. And you know, I'm kind of thinking about what I've been through the last few months because I was very invested in the American election. More, you know. A lot of it is just watching it, observing it like a soap opera, really. But obviously, I feel kind of emotional for, you know, especially with all the trans stuff that's happening over there. It's been very toxic. It's been very toxic.
And hurtful.
But then now it's kind of all over and done, and I feel like, but you know nothing about what's happening in Australia. You know, it's so easy to put your head in the sand a little bit, and I feel like it's time for me to get in touch again. So I've got to pay attention because it's our turn. Our turn is coming up very soon, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I think the thing that we need to be careful of is we do import a lot of attitudes from the US, and you know, not either political side, whichever one you vote for. We don't want to see them start adopting some of the strategies that were displayed by in the US election, and that is my concern. And I think we've already seen a couple of things seep through, and we need to be quite vigilant on that. So look out, because if you do that, political parties will be sending Suzy Rong to you, and you won't know what's hit you.
And the most radical one, that's me.
We love you, Suzy, and but we want to know about your review of All Will Be Well. If you want to see it, it's part of the Melbourne Queer Film Festival. Just head to mqff.com.au for more details. Suzy, tell us what you thought of All Will Be Well.
Pat and Angie are a happy older lesbian couple in Hong Kong. They live a regular life together, lucky to be accepted by family and lucky to have a strong support system of queer women all around them. Disaster strikes, however, when Pat dies suddenly one night and Angie is left to fend for herself. Pat's once loving family gradually turns against Angie, who finds herself being evicted from the home she had bought with Pat. Pat had not signed on the dotted line on her will, and in Hong Kong, like so many parts of the world, same-sex marriage is not recognized, so Angie has little legal recourse. Screening as part of the Melbourne Queer Film Festival, the movie All Shall Be Well 從今以後 is not only a heart-wrenching piece of drama, it brings to discussion one of the biggest concerns of queer people everywhere: what happens to our property and to our partners when one passes away, especially when our relationships are not recognized in most places. The film makes itself even more affecting by showing us initially that Pat and Angie seemed to have gained acceptance and that all was peachy keen, but when Angie was left alone, we see how it became so easy for her to be taken advantage of, and that there was no regard about the possibility about her turning destitute as an older single lady. I found All Shall Be Well to be deeply moving and highly disturbing. It's true that none of this is news to me, but to see it unfold in such a realistic and convincing way really made me shudder. The film is made by Ray Young, who had previously directed and written Twilight's Kiss, which we had talked about on Joy Drive 3 years ago. That too is an extraordinary movie that I urge you to see if you haven't already. Both All Shall Be Well and Twilight's Kiss are about older queer people, which makes them very valuable unusual and rare in an economy that places so much emphasis on youth. They're both incredibly well made, and if you're one who searches for truth in art, they should definitely place high on your list. Screening information for All Shall Be Well can be found at mqff.com.au. Warren, the Melbourne Queer Film Festival commences this Thursday. I hope you enjoyed my pick for this week.
I loved it, Suzy. I really did. You picked the best movie to watch, but you also summed it up accurately. Deeply moving and highly disturbing. I found it really upsetting to watch. Even now I'm getting a bit upset about it. Just watching two people in love and having a relationship and being accepted as part of the family. And we know, Suzy, that family is big in Asian cultures, and to see that in an instant almost disrespected, I found was absolutely heartbreaking. And it triggered me a little bit because it took me back to the early days of HIV when it was still unknown and there was a lot of fear. And we saw lots of young men die suddenly, and families that had nothing to do with them swoop in and all of a sudden want to take control of their finances and their assets or what their last wishes are, even though they never had anything to do with the people. It was traumatic. It was traumatic for everyone who was involved in the HIV effort back then. And to think that, this is a totally different year that this film is set. It's a present day film. But to think that that can still go on around the world in same-sex relationships where they're not respected. They're taken for granted while both partners are there, and then the family just come in and take over and disrespect the wishes of the deceased. I found it really upsetting and really disturbing, Suzy.
Yeah, it was very upsetting to watch. And it's interesting that the film is actually... The tone of the film is really mild and really still and quiet. Like, it wasn't super dramatic at all at any point. It never felt melodramatic at any point. No. There was never, like, a lot of drama happening. There was no noise, but just the story unfolding slowly. And at times you could just see it coming, and it just takes its time to happen. It was difficult to watch those things, and also that they didn't portray the family members as kind of archetypal villains. They almost had reasons and excuses for doing what they did, which almost made it worse because it felt so realistic. You go, they have an actual motive for doing what they do, for what they thought they were protecting for themselves, and it all became so real. And I think for those reasons, this film is just extraordinary. It speaks for us as a community. I think the general public doesn't really understand the depth of kind of our concerns, these things that it's very hard to explain to people who don't have to live it, and we only had same-sex marriage for a short time here. So I think it's in yours and mine, constitution. We have this in our mind, at the back of mind a lot. And, this film for Australian audiences just reminds us that, you got to have your paperwork done. You just really have to get it organized. Absolutely.
And the hard part was seeing, I think they referred to her, was it Auntie Angie? And just seeing her face when she's realising that basically her relationship didn't mean anything. And, and I know this sounds very cliche, but when the family discuss or refer to her after the death of her partner as, her best friend, you can just see the horror in her face, and she doesn't say anything, but she just internalises it, and you can just see her sink when she hears herself described as the best friend of someone who she's been in a long-term relationship with, and a really good, healthy relationship from what we can see for the small amounts of it. Really sad. And, and family arguing about what to do with the ashes, as if they know best, and disregarding what the deceased's wishes were, and her partner trying to ensure that those wishes are fulfilled, and the family just how can you do it? How can you come in and just override someone like that? Isn't there? I don't have any conscience. I don't know. I was disgusted with their behaviour. It was cold. It was we know best. Yet during the time of their relationship, they welcomed her as family. And I didn't understand that, Suzy, from, I suppose, a Hong Kong cultural perspective, is how do you have someone as part of your family and then how do you eject them so quickly? Isn't family a strong, lifelong bond in Hong Kong culture?
A part of the narrative was that they were trying to protect their side of the family because they had financial problems because they weren't very good with their money as opposed to Pat's, Pat, who seemed to be much more in control of her life. And then because Pat had died unexpectedly, her brother, that side of the family who have struggled with money for years, saw it as an opportunity. They weren't presented, well, I guess they were presented as sort of opportunistic, but you could see how all the dominoes were going to fall, how it was going to hit Angie the way that it hit, and they, obviously they had their reasons, but they were unreasonable because she needed a home to live. She's a 70-year-old woman.
Yeah, and they were happy to boot her out on the street.
Yeah,
and she bought the house with her partner, but didn't go on the title or the deed because for whatever reason. But and I know we, in hindsight, they say, "Oh, we didn't do it," but sometimes people don't, and for whatever reason, they didn't do it. But then the family just disregarded it, and obviously the Hong Kong courts didn't see anything in it. She got a small payment, and that was basically like a small support payment, and that was it. But they built this home together over their life, and then the family just came and said, "No, sorry, it's ours. We need it," as though she wasn't part of the family. I mean, they could have just said, "Yeah, for goodness sake, stay there until to the end of your life, and then we'll worry about it." No.
I really admire the filmmaking.
It's great.
I started this chat about talking about politics because I thought, isn't this like it never talks about politics at all. It never talks about queer rights and all that at all. But it's all embedded in the story. It's all implied. It's all about how do we make sure that we are okay as a community, and how, if you are a conscientious straight person, how do you make sure that the laws on your land protect those who are disadvantaged, And I think in that way the film is so skillful, just making you feel so strongly, like it's so deeply affecting. It makes you feel so strongly and makes you think about laws, thinks about governments and legislation without talking about it in a kind of direct way. And I, on a technical level, I really admire the filmmaking, but also it's just such an emotional piece of art. I was so happy to be able to share this with everyone today.
I'm glad you did too. It's called All Will Be Well. You can catch it as part of the Melbourne Queer Film Festival. And the other thing is, it emphasises, there was a message in the film, wasn't there? There's an importance of, I suppose, acceptance and understanding of relationships, both within families and within society, because, and I know we're under a different set of laws here, but in Hong Kong, from what I understood, was the family did one thing, but the law of Hong Kong didn't provide that backup to recognise that relationship. And I feel like somehow it all needs to sort of come together.
Yeah, I think one of the messages of the film is that people change, and you can't really, people betray people. That happens every day, and you just need these kind of systemic things to be in place to protect those who are vulnerable. And then we as queer people are extremely vulnerable in places like that. Pat was probably very convinced that her family would take care of Angie.
As you would.
Yeah, because there was no evidence that anything bad was going to happen. But clearly she needed the legal structure for Angie, which they don't have in Hong Kong.
I think, it can be hard enough getting older as a queer person and, being forced into certain aged care, etc., and perhaps back into the closet. The last thing we need to deal with is family coming in and making things worse. You know, let us have dignity in our older years of life and go away, everyone. If you're not going to let us have it. And I think the other thing is, I just want to say too, a bit of a plug for Joy Drive here, is we do have Sally Nichols from Nichols Family Lawyers coming on once a month. So keep listening to Joy Drive, because we do talk about family law quite a lot. And I think it's important that we're able to converse in that and to know what to do in order to protect ourselves, because we can't necessarily rely on the extended family. A couple of messages have come in saying, love the show. Another one, I missed the beginning. What show are you describing, please? We are talking about All Will Be Well, which is part of the Melbourne Queer Film Festival. If you head to their website, mqff.com.au, you can find out how to get tickets. Highly recommend it. Suzy, I want to thank you for recommending that one for this week. Well worth it. I really enjoyed watching it.
Great, I'm glad. I'm going to be away next week though for a family event in Singapore.
Oh.
But when I return, we'll be taking a look at a Netflix documentary. It's all over the kiss that changed Spanish football.
Oh.
Until then, enjoy the Melbourne Queer Film Festival. I'll see you in a couple of Tuesdays. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's Suzy Wrong. Don't forget, All Will Be Well, part of the Melbourne Queer Film Festival, mqff.com.au. We'll chat to Suzy in a couple of weeks. News headlines coming up next.